And it did kind of range between like very practical things like we need to upgrade the communication systems and rebuild hospitals and get food into people's mouths, very kind of very bread and butter sorts of things, all the way to this kind of dramatically produced AI video of what Gaza is going to look like. This was from FIFA.
So first of all, for people who are not necessarily familiar with the Board of Peace, remind us why it was set up and its purpose.
Sure. So this was the kind of initiative that Trump founded, that Trump kind of made himself the chairman for life of, where he that was going to deal with the reconstruction issues, the humanitarian issues associated with the day after for Gaza, right? The day after the intention was a peace was reached with Israel. And so Trump has brought together world leaders to participate in this body that some feel challenges the United Nations in this role in the Gaza reconstruction.
And so explain to us, this was the first meeting. Who was there and who wasn't there when we're talking about countries and international support?
Sure. So we had a lot of countries that have been fairly friendly with the Trump administration. We had Hungary represented. We had Argentina represented. We had Italy represented. We had a number of the Middle Eastern, the wealthier Gulf monarchies represented. And so these are countries that have been very close with the Trump administration, very willing to participate in his endeavors, and also fairly willing and able to move their political systems along fast enough to participate in this, because a lot of other countries, they might have had a democratic reason why they couldn't. They needed a legislature to approve it or something like that, or they felt like the concept itself was problematic.
Is it clear what they're aiming to do, both in the short term and in the long term?
Yeah, so this first Board of Peace meeting kind of laid out in a good amount of detail the kinds of projects that they're working on. We had a presentation about technology endeavors, rebuilding the wireless infrastructure in the country, some of the humanitarian work that's being done around hunger, and then and some ideas that were floated that may appear to be a lot more far-fetched, including kind of this idea of a Gaza Riviera, a major FIFA football stadium. There was a video presented about that as well. So there was kind of a range of ideas and a range of people that were kind of represented in this kind of hodgepodge effort.
And are the Israelis on board with this? How much are the Palestinian people on board with this?
Well, so the Israelis were represented at this meeting. They said that their kind of key priority was making sure that the ideology that led to Hamas in the first place was not restored. That was kind of the point that they made, which was a little bit out of step with some of the other messages that were being given at the meeting. As far as Palestinian representation, there was representation from the body that, in theory, is going to take over the governance of Gaza in the coming months. But all of that is still kind of to be worked out, exactly how, the governance of Gaza will work, the police force, the role of Hamas, the role of this international stabilization force. And so a lot of those questions remain to be worked out, but there was some technocratic Palestinian representation at this meeting.
And is it clear what's going to happen when we think about some major European players not being involved? Is that seen as not an issue, or are they trying to get those countries, notably like the UK, on board?
Well, so what's interesting is that the exact scope of who's going to be in this Board of Peace is still not fully known, even though we had a number of countries present at the meeting. So the Europeans are one factor. We had the Italians and the Hungarians, but we didn't have a broad coalition of Europeans that were represented here. They have a lot of issues with how this is being set up and how it might work with the UN, this sort of thing. So that's very much an open question. But there's also other questions about open membership. President Trump told me and a group of other reporters today that he wants China and Russia to be a part of this, and that he's invited them to do so. Really, we're talking about a very ecumenical process in terms of a lot of different perspectives going into this, and whether they can come to a consensus remains to be seen.
You've mentioned the role and where it sits in relation to the United Nations a couple of times. There are concerns from people who are worried about what this board of peace will mean. I mean, not least the fact that Donald Trump has basically said he'll be in charge of it forever, not just during his term as president. Is it seen potentially as a threat to the UN in as much as working against what the UN is doing or diverting resources from the UN, or is that overstating it?
No, that is the concern. That is the concern, is whether these two things can feasibly coexist together, whether they're duplicative, whether they conflict, and whether there's going to be governance issues that relate from that. So that is not a minimal concern. I think the new development that was interesting for me today was to hear Trump kind of talk about the idea of UN reform in kind of more detail than we've heard from him before. This idea that the U.S., which is in arrears at the UN, has not paid its bills. He says that he wants to pay more for the UN and be directly involved in kind of reforming the organization to something that fits his style more, and then literally changing the actual building that the UN operates out of in New York in terms of redesigning it. So that was interesting to hear the president, who sometimes has taken a very kind of negative view towards the UN and towards multilateralism in general, right? Saying that he actually wants to have a very a tremendous presence in the UN going forward.
Has there been a hard commitment of cash?
So the Trump administration has said that they will commit $10 billion to this endeavor. We don't know much about that commitment. We don't know where that money is coming from. Obviously money that's spent has to have some kind of congressional authorization behind it. We don't know what that looks like, or if they're trying to shift funds from other programs to this, or they plan to go back to Congress to get that money. We just don't know. But that was the number that Trump announced as far as the U.S. commitment. And then all of these other countries are ponying up money as well as in some cases troops for this international stabilization force.
What did you make of it? Because I saw one speech by Tony Blair last night, and he was talking about a vision for Gaza with AI and opportunity. Sound like an amazing place, but a million miles from where Gaza is anywhere near right now. Did you feel it was fanciful? It was optimistic? It was realistic? What was your view?
Well, it was kind of a hodgepodge. I mean, there were a range of speakers. We heard from a number of different countries, a number of people who are working on these issues, and it did kind of range between like very practical things like we need to upgrade the communication systems and rebuild hospitals and get food into people's mouths, very kind of very bread and butter sorts of things, all the way to this kind of dramatically produced AI video of what Gaza is going to look like. This was from FIFA, of what Gaza is going to look like with all of these football stadiums that are going to be built and spread around this kind of entirely destroyed place right now, right? So there was a range of ideas from the realistic to the more fanciful.
Trevor, it's lovely to speak to you as always. Thank you so much.
Good to see you.